Hello everyone, I'm back. As you know, if you watched my last video, I was having my technical problems with my iPad, but I'm happy to say that it's up and working again and everything is fine. It just took a bit longer than usual, which is why I didn't do the last two videos last week, for which I apologise. It just wasn't possible with my old dinosaur of my old iPad, which is over there somewhere. So today we're back on track and hopefully we'll stay on track. But today I thought we'd carry on with our business series, as a lot of you have said that you're enjoying it. So thank you very much for that. And today what I thought I'd do is show you an idea I've had, or an exercise, whatever you want to call it, of how if you're still at the point where you haven't started your business yet, or if you are at the point where you thought, you know what, I'd like to do this as a business, but I'm not quite sure how to start or where to start, or if you've got to a point where you started your business but you're feeling a bit stuck. And let's be honest, we've all been there. It doesn't matter how big a business you've got, even the big businesses, they had to start from somewhere. And I'm sure even they had at the early stages thought, where do I go from here? What do I do now? So I've had a little idea which might help you. And the idea came when I was having a day off. I know, typical. I got told off by a member of my family the other day for thinking about work on a day off, but I wasn't actually thinking about work. It just happened. I'll tell you what I was doing. I was out with a friend and we both grabbed a craft magazine and we were looking at it, and in the magazine was an interview with an established crafter. And I thought, you know what, that's not a bad idea. So what I did, I've written down some of the questions. It was a long interview, so I haven't gone into all of them, and some of them weren't really relevant for this type of exercise. But what I thought I would do is ask some of the questions. You don't have to answer them now. If you want to share your answers in the comments, please do, but you don't have to. But what I thought we'd do is, you could do this for yourself. If you've got a magazine, a craft magazine, that's got an interview with a crafter, what you could do, by all means, read the whole article if it's something you're interested in. I have done, I've had a little look. But read the questions and then answer them as if you're answering for your own business, whether you're thinking of starting or whether you've started and you've got a bit stuck. So I'll give you an example with the questions that I've written down. I've got my notes here, just out of sight. Well, out of your sight, in my sight, off camera, I should say. So the first question I've written down is, what is your crafting background? Now, when you're starting a business, or indeed if you've already started a business, it's good, of course, you know your crafting business, but it's a good idea to have that written down somewhere, because especially if you're, like all businesses should, if you're putting together a business plan, even if you're not intending to use it, originally business plans were if you needed a business loan from a bank to get up and running. But even if you don't need that, it's still a good idea to have a business plan written down, so that you can track where you started, how you got started, where you got stuck, where you want to go. It's always good to have a plan of where you came from and where you're going. So if you do get stuck, you can look back at that plan and think, oh yes, I can do that. I've done that before. So that was the first question that I've written down. What is your crafting background? So mine, for example, wasn't even in crafting. It was in painting. My crafting background was I started making greeting cards from the paintings I did, and even some of the photographs that I took of my dad's flowers in the garden. He was a great gardener, and so I took a lot of flowers. Took photographs of flowers, but I painted them as well. So that's my story, where I started. I started off with paintings, and then when die cutting machines and stamping and things came more available, I grew into that type of thing. So that's what you can do. Start with where you came from. How did you first get into crafting? Whether it was from a child, whether you craft with a member of the family, or on your own, whether you just had an idea and thought, I might try that. So keep a note of where you came from, how you first started your crafting. And the next question would be, which of your crafting supplies is your favourite to use? Now, That might be an obvious question to you, but if you're thinking of, or you've already started doing your crafting as a business, you'll want to use your favourite piece of equipment. Whether, if you're a paper crafter, for example, it might be your die cutting machine. If you do sewing, it might be your sewing machine. It might be a favourite machine or gadget that you've made yourself even. So having a note of, even if it's just a mental note, of what your favourite machine or favourite supply, I should say, it doesn't have to be a machine, it could be stamps, it could be dies. So whatever your favourite is, that will determine, in a way, your style of your products. And even services, you might have, if you're a teacher, if you want to teach craft, you might have a particular subject that you absolutely love teaching. So keep that in mind as well, and that will give you a structure and a basis of where you're going to go. So if you ever get stuck, whether you're teaching or whether you're making products, you can go back to that favourite teaching subject or that favourite supply and think, what can I do with that? If it's a supply, for example, have a little play with it. If you like using stamps, have a little play with your stamps. You'll never know what you come up with. And the next question is there any other crafting product, apart from your favourite one, that you've not tried but you'd like to? So it's good to have it. So, for example, if you do die cutting but you've never used a stamping platform, you might just use the blocks, or it could be the other way around. You've only ever used blocks but you've never used a stamping platform, and you think, do you know what, I'd really like to see what that's like. I wouldn't be without my stamping platform, by the way. Whether it's the one that I brought or whether it's the one I made myself, I wouldn't be without my stamping platform. But there may be a crafting supply that you've not tried yet. So keep that in mind. I think, try it. You never know. It could be your next fixation. It could be your next craze. You think, oh, I love this. I'm going to use that again. And it'll keep you focused on how to move forward, which is what you always want to be thinking of doing in your business. And again, with your teaching, if you're passionate about teaching a particular subject, but there's a subject you've not yet touched on that you think, do you know what, I'd like to teach that. So, for example, if you're a sewer and you like teaching dressmaking patterns, but you've never tried embroidery, you might want to try that. So that could be another example. You might like to teach how to do embroidery, preferably by hand, but if you want to do it on a machine, that's absolutely fine. But that's just my personal preference. I don't use machines because in my business I state that everything is handmade, and if you do everything on a machine, yes, I use die cutting machines to cut shapes, but I don't, if I'm doing any sewing projects, I don't do very many, but I always do them hand because I have a reputation of saying that my products are handmade, so I don't want any machine stitching on it. But that's just me. But it could be that if you're a sewer and you think, do you know what, I'm fed up with doing hand stitching, but you want to have a go at using a sewing machine instead, that's fine. So if there's something that you've not tried yet but you'd like to, keep that in mind, because you might like it. And with if you're teaching, you might find that you absolutely love teaching a subject that you've never considered before. And so the next question, when the going gets rough, what inspires you to continue? So in other words, if you get stuck, we've all been there, we've all been stuck in the past, and that's the point where you might think, do you know what, it's not worth it. I can tell you it is. So once you get to that point, which you might well do, or you might have already been there, I know I have, and you get to think, what on earth am I going to do now? If you get especially if you're a new business, you might be overwhelmed with ideas. That was my problem when I first started my business. I was overwhelmed with ideas and I didn't know what to do first. So if that's you, write down all of your ideas, even if you do feel overwhelmed, and pick your top 3, whether it's for teaching subjects or making products. So if that's where you are at the moment, you're overwhelmed with ideas for either teaching subjects or making products, write them all down and then pick 3 and work on those, and that will help you past that rough patch. Or if you're thinking, oh, I can't do this anymore, there's nothing wrong with having a break. Just take a break, even if it doesn't have to be forever. Do you know what? a day can make a lot of difference. I've done that. I thought, do you know what? I've been there. I can't do this anymore. But you can. But perhaps especially if you've been working hard or you've been working a lot, just take a break for a day. Have a day off. Go and do some shopping. I don't mean craft shopping, or you can if you want to. Go into town, have some lunch, do something totally different, and then come back to it afresh the next day. So that's quite an effective way of getting out of a spot when you're just feeling stuck. And another question that's come up is, what are your hopes for the future of your business? Now, that's a good one to keep in mind, even if you're thinking, well, future, I've only just got started or barely got started. That's okay. It's always a good idea. So when we start our businesses, our crafting businesses, or indeed any business, most people have got, eventually I'd like to do that. At the moment, I'm small. At the moment, we've started small, but eventually I'd like to be doing that. So once you've got your crafting business or your crafting idea, even your business idea, have an idea of where you want it to be in the future, maybe 3 years, 5 years, and write that down. Write that down on your business plan in 3 years' time. For example, if you're making 6 projects or products, or you're selling 6 programs now, say, for example, in 3 years' time, I'd like to have 10 products or 20 products or a different range of subjects to teach. So have an idea of what you'd like to do in the future. And another question that came up is there any type of crafting that you'd like to do that you've not tried yet? So, for example, let's pick on I've picked on paper crafters long enough. Let's pick on those that do sewing. So, for example, if you make sewing projects, for example, clothes or toys, or knitting projects, knitting and sewing, or even if you're a sewer and you think, do you know what, I'd like to have a go at knitting. I'd never learned to knit. A lot of younger people don't learn to knit anymore, probably because they're not taught. I was taught as a child, not in school, but by my mother. But what she didn't teach me how to do was read a pattern, which is why I designed my own. And so that could be another thing. If you're a knitter, you might like to think, I'd like to design my own patterns. And you can do that. That's absolutely doable. So if there's something you've not yet tried yet, whether it's within your own sphere, whether it's something completely different. So if you are a knitter or a sewer and you'd like to try paper crafting, for example, or needlepoint, or that diamond painting, golly, I wouldn't have the patience for that. I admire those that do. Or needle felting. I don't know if people still do that, but it's another one. It's one of those you have to have patience for. And I have tried needle felting, and to be honest, I didn't really take to it terribly well. But it could be clay. You might want to use air-dried clay and make things like that. So there are a wealth of crafting things you could try. So if there's something that you'd like to, but you haven't yet, think about when you might like to do that. Because once you've done that and you've practiced your new craft, you're going to have a new range of products if you like it. If you like what you've been doing, you're going to have a new range of products you can sell. And that's always good news. And likewise, if you teach, if you think, well, I've always taught paper craft, I've never included sewing or knitting in my lessons, do that as well, if that's what you choose to do. So it's always good to have an idea of where you're going to be going in the future. Yes, it's important to know what you're doing now, but it's always an idea, even if you've just got it written down in a notebook somewhere. Where are you going to be in 3 to 5 years' time? And another question, which really follows on from the previous one, what's your biggest crafting ambition? Now, this would be good when you tell your story, because everybody loves a good story. So when you write your story in your bio, when you do your initial posts, what's your biggest crafting ambition? So it could be you might want your own range of products. It might be that if you're teaching, you might want to set up your own academy. And now, if you're at that stage, that early stage where you think, don't be stupid, Dawn, I could never set up an academy. Do you know what? I thought that. My business has been going for just over a year now. And when I first started, I never even thought I could even do an academy, run an academy, never mind teaching it, but it's working out. So it doesn't matter how big, you can dream big, you're allowed to do that. It's your business, you can dream big. So what's your biggest crafting ambition? And again, have it written down. It's nice to know what you're aiming for. And the final question I've written down from the list of, there was about 20 questions in this particular one. It was a double page and then it went over the page. Aside from crafting, do you have any other hobbies or interests? Now, that might not necessarily relate to your immediate business, but it's a good idea to put it because, again, it's part of your story. For example, one of my other hobbies, some of you may know that I like to play music. When I say music, I don't mean listen to CDs or whatever people listen to these days. I like to play. I play my flute. And I play the organ a bit. I'm not the greatest organist in the world. I'm a much better flute player. But I like to play my musical instruments. And I'll never do that, although I was a registered flute teacher at one time. But I will probably never bring music into my business unless I decide to play some music in my videos, but that's another story. But I would never, well, at the moment anyway, consider doing music as a business. To me, that was always a hobby. And I want it to stay a hobby. But if you've got other interests that you do, because if your followers only see you come onto your platforms or your posts, and they see your wonderful product or your wonderful classes, they might think, golly, doesn't she do anything else? So it's always a good, in your story, say that you like to do other things and what your other hobbies are. Obviously, if there are personal things that you don't want to share, that's fine. You don't have to do that. But if you've got other hobbies and interests, I took a while ago when Graham was still alive, my husband, I took an interest in one of his interests. Now, he was a great Egyptologist. What he didn't know about ancient Egypt and the pharaohs wasn't worth knowing. He was brilliant at it. Even later on in life, when he got dementia, he still remembered all of that. He couldn't remember my name or what day it was, but he knew all that. So I took an interest in that, something I'd never do for a business because it's not my field. But I found it interesting. So if you've got other interests and hobbies that you do outside of crafting, make sure you put that in your story when you first start. If you haven't, you can still add to your story. There's no harm in that, nothing wrong with that. You can still add to your story or even add it as a separate story. When I'm away from crafting, when I'm away from my business, I like to do. Some people like to do gardening. Now, I do gardening because I have to, not because I want to. It's not my greatest field. The grass needs cutting, the brambles need cutting back. That's about all I can do. I'm no gardener, I don't know one plant from another, but some people love gardening and they're good at it. They know what plants should go where and what type of soil and what time of year they should go in. I haven't got a clue. But that's just me. But so if you've got other things that you like to do, your hobbies, your other interests, outside of your crafting, especially outside of your business, do put that in. It might just be something as simple as you like to go for a walk after lunch, or especially if you've got a dog, I used to have a dog, and after lunch, I always used to take him for a walk, and we enjoyed it. So that's one of the other things I like to do. I like walking. And when I'm walking, I sometimes get inspiration for other products. I see something, I think, oh, that would make a good texture, or that would make a good product, or that would make a good class. So list any other interests you might have and hobbies outside of your crafting. So, as I say, grab a craft book, especially if it's got an interview in it. So if you're stuck, going back to what we said at the beginning, if you're stuck, grab yourself a craft book. If there's an interview in it, read the questions. Of course, as we said at the beginning, of course you can read the full article if you're interested in it. But read the question and then answer the question, even if it's just to yourself. You don't have to do a video like this, but you could keep a notepad if you want to. So if your first question was, what is your crafting background, which is where we started, don't worry, we're not going to go through it all again. You could keep a list, keep a notepad when you're answering these questions, even if it's just for yourself. Keep a notepad, write down the question if you want to, and then write your answer. Don't copy their answer, write your answer. If you've got a record of that somewhere, even if it's just somewhere that you would see, if you ever get stuck or you want to know how you're going to move forward, you could look back to those question and answer sessions that you've done with yourself. You could even make it fun. You could ask a friend or a family member to ask the questions and get them to interview you. Doesn't have to be recorded, but although you can if you want to. But if you want to, just get someone to answer the questions for you and write the answers down, so if you ever do get stuck, you can say, now what did I write down? I wrote that down. So keep a list of where you'll want to go, what you do when you get stuck. So if it happens again, you've got something to look back at. So these interviews in magazines are really, really helpful. Again, they're interesting to read the original article, but they're also good for you and me, because I still do it too. I still need to keep track of where I'm going, to read the questions and then stop and think about how you would answer if you were applying that question to your business. So that's it for today. A bit longer today. I was just looking at the timer on my camera and it's just gone 20 minutes, which is probably the longest I've ever done. A chatty video. It's probably the longest I've ever done, probably. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope you found these tips useful. And as I say, if you ever come across a magazine, and I'm sure you will, where you've got an interview, answer them for yourself and keep a note so that you can keep moving forward and you've got something to look back to. So that's it for today. I hope you've enjoyed it and I hope you found it useful. And I will see you on Wednesday, and I've got a really good idea for a product or just a card making project that we can do together on Wednesday. It won't be a business one unless you sell greeting cards, then of course you can make these to extend your range of cards. But this is just going to be a fun paper crafting project on Wednesday. So I'll catch up with you then. And until then, do take care, everybody. Have fun. And as always, happy crafting. Bye-bye for now.